we're going to have a great conversation. My first, oh, forgive me, Nicolas Sornin and Olivier Hersent. I was thinking of the pronunciation in French. So welcome, gentlemen. My first question is, you have over 1,200 people at this conference. I mean, how does it feel that the technology that you invented is now all over the globe, really changing and solving some of the world's biggest problems? And you have the most devices and members connected throughout the globe. How does it feel?
Okay, thank you for having us here. How does it feel? Okay, the whole story started like more than 10 years ago now, when actually at the time was LoRa, not LoRaWAN, got invented. So for the, for the first few years, it really felt like it was our baby, and now it's just too big. So it. For the last 2 years, I've been outside Semtech, so I'm now a user of the technology. So I more and more see it as a technology with some great advantages, but also some limitations sometimes. And but effectively being there today, just seeing the logo, LoRa, exactly as we drew it 10 years ago, it's just nice. So kind of proud. And also a feeling that it's just out of control. It's just basically it's not my baby anymore. I just lost it. It's living its own life.
That's it, Olivier.
I think what's impressive is after these over 2 years of COVID, the ecosystem was way smaller 3 years ago, and then we sort of see from the websites, from the marketplaces, that there are more and more devices. And then you arrive here, and physically you see all these devices, and you realize that it's real. You can touch them, because in the early days we were literally fighting with every use case. Is there a sensor for this? When will someone build a sensor for this? And now you say CO2, you have a dozen sensors for CO2. Vibration, you have a dozen sensors. So it's great. And what makes me feel very good. Nicolas and Olivier Hersent, who fortunately can't be here, were really in the PHY layer. My dream, my thing on it was the ecosystem. How it does all work together. It doesn't fragment. And so far, finger crossed, the ecosystem didn't fragment. The IoT ecosystem is incredibly fragmented. Every use case is different. Countries are different. Restrictions. So the nature is really pushing for fragmentation. And yet we have all these companies talking about one network, it still works. So that makes me very happy, actually, to this feeling of work together.
We'd love to hear the genesis story of the idea, but before that, you mentioned COVID. Do you think the last couple of years have pushed the technology forward or making the connection more urgent?
I think the last 2 years were actually used by companies to recenter around their core competencies, or to advance their development, because there was so much. That's the only thing you could do for a while. It was really difficult to sell anything or anything. So actually, there was actually a lot of development done during those 2 years, and we can see the results just now coming out of the labs.
So we'd love to hear, Olivier, did you want to share?
Yeah, the main impact that I saw is realization of the cost of moving, getting to a sensor, getting to workplace. I think most companies, even though they had a technician going meter after meter every day, to monitor, pressure, valve, or anything, it was sort of taken for granted. It's free. This guy is there anyway. With COVID, couldn't come. There was no way to monitor that valve. So they started to develop. And this morning there was a great presentation by Total, the large oil company. You can imagine how many valves they have. They developed during the COVID years this way of remotely getting to the device, remotely diagnosing ball bearings, for example. Can you imagine that ball bearing machine that all of a sudden vibrates or heats? And it was taken for granted that the only way you could do this was by physically sending the expert to the machine to sense that vibration is weird. All of this now they manage to do remotely, and that technician realizes that now he can do all this from the comfort of his home. And if it's raining or snow or whatever, it does not need to go around. So there was this realization that IoT gives you that ubiquity, that possibility to actually do things remotely.
So going back to your Genesis story and to inspire the developers in the room, what inspired the LoRa technology?
We have to make the distinction here between LoRa and LoRaWAN. So
please do, because I think
okay.
Unless some of us know the difference, but many don't. Thank you for explaining that.
So I'll talk about the genesis of LoRa, and then I'll let Olivier talk about the genesis of LoRaWAN, which came a couple of years later, which was protocol on top of LoRa. So for LoRa, and actually that's really well aligned with the topic today, because it was really academic at the beginning. So with my fellow Olivier Hersent, we both from the three of us are actually from Polytechnic. We all went to Polytechnic, also different years. So Olivier a bit before us, but Olivier Hersent and myself were the same year. We were buddies at school. And we, like, random life even made that we actually ended up in the same company at the same time. And we really started during evenings discussing, how we could actually build a modulation where it's a bit technical, but basically where the signal still autocorrelates whatever frequency offset, independently of frequency offset. And actually mathematically we wrote down the equation, and there are only two solutions. It's either a chirp or it's direct, which is basically an impulse infinitely short and with infinite amplitude. Nature doesn't like infinite amplitude. So the only solution we were left with was actually the chirp, which is, what bats use to locate them in caves, or what sonars use, or what radars of Second World War are using. So it's a frequency ramp. And that has some very neat mathematical properties. And so we basically fell in love with it. It's the concept was really neat. And we thought we could develop a very simple yet robust receiver that would have extremely good performance. And so this Eureka moment was like literally an evening. And then it took us several years to actually get it to work, as usual. And then a couple of years later, we met with Olivier, and that triggered the LoRaWAN story.
And so now you can talk to a device, and the device can be very far away. And the next thing was how to turn this into an ecosystem. If you just have this, a physical layer that can control the device, you're going to end up with very, very specific use cases. It's going to be hard to drive volume. So the idea was how to build a network on top of this. At the time, there was, and still today, 6LoWPAN. You probably know this, as well as the IO2. 15.4, Zigbee style modulation. So there was already a lot of know-how on how to get networking on top of relatively low performance radio. So we started with this, and actually I wanted to bring the PowerPoint. I still have the PowerPoint from them. We had a drawing board with a 6LoWPAN 802 15.4 frames, source address, destination address, hop count, and so on. But LoRa was so, extremely low resource, even compared to Zigbee.
Very constrained.
So this was really, and it happened literally like this. Do we really need that field source address? Well, the network talks to the device. Okay, let's kill the source address. They really need a hop counter? Not really. Let's kill the hop counter. So that was the easy part. Just getting rid of all of the useless fields. And then there was a very difficult problem, and I'm sure you remember this. In Zigbee, in actually most radio protocols for enterprise, a device is talking to only one gateway. The acknowledge is immediate. You talk. If I receive your frame, I ACK it immediately. And the whole protocol is organized around this immediate response. If you think of it, immediate response means only one gateway can receive the signal. And we didn't want this. In already the most advanced protocol in water metering, you had this notion of all gateways receive the signal. So we, Nicolas insisted a lot on this, we want all gateways to receive and process the signal. But if you do this, you can't ACK immediately. So we scratched our heads, okay, what to do? Okay, we're going to, you can't ACK at any time because you don't want the device to keep listening. So the idea came, okay, let's hack exactly 1 second after the uplink. So it gives us 1 second of processing to decide which gateway is going to respond and so on. But then that created another problem. What about collisions? All of the protocols at the time, if you use ZigBee or all these protocols, the anti-collision mechanism is based on if you heard something, don't talk for a while. You just let the hack through. But now it doesn't work because we delayed that hack. And that's when, I think it was you, Nicolas said, oh, by the way, that chop, we have two ways of doing it. We have the up chop and the down chop. So if we use up chop for uplink and down chop for downlink, then we don't have the collision. We get rid of the problem. And I think that was it. And if you sum all of this, you pretty much get LoRaWAN.
Well, pretty exact situation, a picture of the situation, yes.
Nicolas, you mentioned, thank you, Olivier. You mentioned academia, which is the academia and industry partnership is something people don't really think about at this point, but it's very crucially important. Can you discuss the importance of that relationship?
Yep. So for a while, I was a very fast-paced industry-only guys. Academia was just way too slow. So I was saying, yeah, well, let's forget about this. We need to go fast. And the only way to go fast is to get well-paid engineers and drive them hard. And then over the years, my position just gradually shifted. We thought we need both. Actually, the problem with engineers is they are very short-sighted. They only work on very well-defined subjects. And it's actually really hard to deep innovation is very slow. It takes many brains to mature, and it takes a lot of time, and it takes some very free-minded people. So I'm now quite convinced that actually to succeed, you need both, and you need to establish a good. You basically need academic people interested on your subject, or you can't actually pull them. They have to come by themselves. And the great thing about LoRa is actually because it's one of those technologies, it's one of the radio technology which is the easiest to use. It's very cheap. Everybody can buy a LoRa chip. Everybody can try and play with it. So it has attracted a lot of attention from academia because the barrier to entry is very low. It's very easy to get started and to build a project on it. So very fortunately, we have a lot of students worldwide experimenting with it. And out of 1,000 projects, one actually comes with a very, very good ideas. So just to give you an example, I had a student in Netherlands, actually, we came up with a very good coding idea, which eventually led to one of the algorithms used for a firmware upgrade to actually compensate for lost frames. So that's a derivation of an idea that was actually, that students came with.
Great. I love what deep innovation takes a lot of time and
a lot of brains.
And a lot of brains, and also the entrepreneurial mindset of craziness / risk, the appetite for risk, right? Olivier, do you have anything?
On the university side, what's fascinating now, there are actually many universities that are starting to develop their IoT bubble. Some excellent courses. There is one in France from University of Savoie-Mont Blanc, south of France. They recently translated their course to English. I encourage you to have a look. It's really outstanding. I mean, the level of quality is such that they actually make money from training, doing professional training.
Sylvain, right?
Yes, Sylvain Montagny.
Yeah.
So if you're looking to build your own course in LoRaWAN in the university, this morning we had Gold Coast from Australia. We are going to go see you. You have a very good source to get started at academic level with something that is really not just superficial. You're really getting into everything you need to know to engineer LoRa. But these networks were isolated. So what we're starting now is to mesh them through roaming. Everyone that has my age, you remember of the early university networks, when the internet was not for granted, you got it from university and universities linked with each other. So we're replicating this now. So if you have your IoT bubble in the university, go get by the booth. We have built that meshing capability so all universities can talk to each other. using brains in parallel, I can only concur with what Nicolas just said. But it's really starting now, this worldwide opening of IoT courses in universities. Getting a good course base is the prerequisite. There is one, go get it. And there is probably more that I'm not aware of.
So do you recommend the industry is proactive about working with universities when it comes with,
but for us, we give hardware, we give devices, because the reward, first of all, you get trained people, you get good ideas, and it's not necessarily on the file layer, that how you connect to devices, it's how you use the information. A good example is that demo that you see many of us with that tracker around our neck, and then you get a screen with a dot moving. It's incredibly complex to go from what that thing actually produces and a clean dot. Microsoft is doing a heat map on top of it, answering questions like, what is the most visited booth on the venue? Yeah, so you build a heat map out of all these moving dots. This is all this algorithmic aspect of IoT that's very big in universities, because they learn machine learning, AI, and so on. It's so boring when you, except for Nicolas, for most students, the whole pure mathematical aspect of it is boring. They need real stuff, and LoRa brings real stuff.
And I'd love to open up to the audience here. I'm sure they have questions for you. My last question is, what do you hope the public-private relationship can bring regarding advancements in LoRaWAN in the future? What is your hope for the potential?
I'm really well aligned with Olivier saying that basically I think the next barrier to jump is really connecting networks together. In LoRaWAN at the moment, we have a chance effectively that we don't have a fragmented ecosystem in terms of protocol. All devices use the same protocol. However, it's thousands of networks that don't talk to each other for the moment. And the really big challenge now is how do you connect those networks? And it's not even, it's more a job for, faculty of economics, something like that, because it's mostly a business problem. There's still a technical problem to interconnect those simply and in an affordable or even free way. But it's really realizing that it's exactly like the age of internet and Renato. It's really how to get people to realize that actually it's way better to interconnect all those networks rather than seeing all those thousands of small private networks, and that the overall value is bigger for everybody.
So what is the challenge there? What is the main reason that they're not connecting more easily?
I'm not sure I have an answer actually to that.
Yeah. So first of all, it's a dream. It's like my top dream for LoRa is really this interconnect of networks. This let's create immense value together from all these networks. Unlike Wi-Fi, Wi-Fi failed in many ways because you get Wi-Fi everywhere, but you can connect nowhere because people don't share passwords. So I really want LoRa to not go this way. We solved the technical problems, how to interconnect. That is solved. If you're not aware, that is solved. It's called roaming. Then for roaming, you need to have a network ID. This was expensive. Another problem we solved a couple of months back. You can now get a net ID from the LoRa Alliance for very, very, very low cost. And the net ID means that you can roam. It's very synonymous because roam means that if you get packets for your sensor somewhere else in the world, these packets need to find you. So they need an address. That address is net ID. It's now very cheap. So why not do it? I think people can be lazy. My use case, local use case works. So why do something else? It's the dream part of it. If you share that dream that all networks should work together within your organization, just take this extra step to take and connect to others, or at least attract the traffic from other sensors and pass it to others. That doesn't require a net ID. Opening your network to others, you don't even need a net ID. Then you connect to a roaming hub or directly. It's here. It's easy. Your benefit is that if all these networks mesh together, then LoRa becomes an incredibly low power technology. But right now, if the antenna is 10 miles away, you still need to have enough energy to get there. But if you have all these networks meshed together, then the energy you need is really extremely small. You can get infinite battery lives. I think we're getting there. Through various attempts. There are lots of community networks. You've seen Helium. The idea is there. It's never perfect, but it's improving step after step. And I think universities really, they can bring that spirit from the beginning. Like the internet, the military, you can think that the military never thought that the internet would be open to everyone. It was the contrary, my internet. And the universities broke this, they turned it into, it's all open. It's stupid to have a closed internet. And I think universities can also switch that mindset.
To answer while he was talking, I think there is a fear. This is a cybersecurity threat. It's all over the place, and there is it's a misconception. But there is this fear that opening your network to foreign sensors create a security threat in some case, and this comes from actually not understanding exactly how the LoRaWAN model works. Your gateways are receiving those packets whether you like it or not, and it's simply either you decide to just drop them, or you decide to create value by just routing them to who they belong to. And actually, the mechanism routing those packets cannot create, by definition of how LoRaWAN is designed, because you cannot interpret the packet. They're fully encrypted end-to-end. There is nothing that can happen in the way, basically. But I really think that from at least a management perspective, they have the fear that opening up their LoRaWAN gateways is exactly like opening their Wi-Fi networks, which actually exposes all your internal computers, infrastructure data, maybe. And so where university can help is really bringing better, deeper understanding that this isn't the case.
When I think of it, this very problem is also another thing that we changed completely from the existing models of, say, Zigbee. In Zigbee networks, the security password of the network itself is the same as the security password for the payload. So if you open the network, you open the payload. If you close the network, you close the payload. In LoRa, we broke this. There is one password for the network and one password for the payload. They are completely separate. And that's why in LoRaWAN, you can open your network without ever compromising security on your payload. But it's little understood. Again, universities have a role because we think that actually when you talk about network servers or gateways, still today, probably 75% of the user base doesn't really understand what it does. It sort of works, but they don't feel so easy opening the networks. But really from the design phase, LoRa networks were designed to be secure in the air, even if you open the network layer, and that allows exactly what Nicolas was discussing.
The psychology behind security is fascinating, truly. So questions from the audience, please raise your hand, we'll pass the microphone. Oh, forgive me, I can.
First of all, I'm very honored to sit in front of two men who made a baby. Fantastic. I have a question. LoRaWAN is now, LoRa is used as a way of communication between a device and a gateway. Are there any plans to use LoRa as a way of communication between devices? Example given, when a smoke detector detects smoke, and it goes into an alarm mode and starts beeping, he wants to also alarm his fellow smoke detector, say, please go off also. But at the same time, he could warn the ventilation system, there is smoke, please go off. Are there any ideas to use LoRa in that way in the future?
This is a strange, was a strange history look back. So when LoRa was created, there wasn't any gateway. It was just a chip talking to a chip. So actually, LoRa was designed for chip to be able to communicate with chips. The gateway was created completely out of the blue later, because actually this is where we saw the market coming. And so there is inside the Alliance a work which is actually called device-to-device communication. And so there definitely is a plan to standardize ways for two devices to talk directly without going through a gateway, exactly for the kind of use case you're describing.
Thank you.
Other questions? Gentlemen, is there anything else you'd like to say about, in general, your hope for the LoRa technology and LoRaWAN in the future?
I have one real hope is actually, that it will be serving some really useful use case. Always at the beginning, you might be tracking bicycles, tracking cars, etc. That isn't really, socially or environmentally useful. But we're now starting to see real use cases that actually make me proud or are really useful. So I like this. I like to see this, flourishing develop. Really.
For me, I'm very curious about satellite networks. It just began. LoRa started as one specific PHY with these ramps, and then recently added another PHY layer, the FHSS, also from Nicolas and Olivier, which has very different properties and actually excellent properties for space communication. So now below the LoRaWAN umbrella, that sort of Esperanto of IoT, you get this other PHY which can connect to satellite networks. So my sort of hope for LoRaWAN going forward is it remains the glue piece. It remains the layer that remains constant as PHY evolves, and they will evolve, typically like this satellite. And that it should not remain just abstraction layer between a device and another device, but also between networks. So like IP, when you think of it, IP is nothing but a piece of glue that allows innovation to progress without breaking apps. And my hope for LoRaWAN is just the same, that it's going to remain that piece of glue that remains constant as innovation progresses in communication, space communication, to keep the applications, actually not avoid breaking the applications as you get innovation on the PHY layers.
Thank you. Any other last questions? Well, thank you so much, Olivier and Nicolas.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you. And thank you everyone for joining us.